On today's Locked On Jayhawks season preview for the upcoming KU basketball season, who the heck is going to be in the starting five?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson at D Johnson Radio on Twitter. He's Nick Schwert at Nick_Schwert. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thank you for making LOJ your first listen every day. Thank you to Everydayers catching each and every show. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and find us on YouTube where you can like and subscribe to the show. We're previewing the KU basketball season on today's episode with some fun questions. Little KU football after the close loss to Kansas State. And whose stat line is it anyway, where we'll actually look into, I have the fourth quarter numbers. Everybody's saying, hey, give Devin Neal the ball more in the fourth quarter. I'm going to actually give you the numbers on what those are at, and we're going to have Nick guess on some of that stuff. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So, Nick, I am in a complete tizzy with who the heck is going to even be the starting five for this team. So let's start with our season preview right here. What is the opening night starting five against Howard? And if you even want to go one game further for the first game that really matters, the North Carolina game, what do you think that starting five is? Forget the starting five down the stretch. What do you think it is right off the bat?
Are we assuming that Hunter Dickinson is going to be healthy and ready to play?
Yes, I would. Yeah.
Okay. So I think there are 4 spots that are locked up. I think Dajuan, Zeke, KJ, and Hunter. You can lock those guys in.
So even though Zeke didn't start against Washburn, you think he's locked up?
He looks like one of the most complete players on the court. He just does. Now, granted, you're always going to look better when you're knocking down threes. If I take away a hot shooting night, you start to say, well, okay, the box score is a little empty, but watching him play out there, again, Washburn, everybody looked like they belonged. He just seems to play in control. He can move the ball well. He just makes good decisions. It seems like a very good complementary piece to Zeke. And I think that's the way I'm looking at this 2 spot. We already know Dajuan is going to be a starter. So who is the best player to put alongside him? It's not necessarily who's the next best player, who's the next best guard, who is the best backcourt mate next to Dajuan. Shaq, as electric as Diggy Coit, as electric as he's been, I'm not sure that's a lineup you're going to roll out a lot with him and Dajuan in the backcourt. Zeke, to me, makes a little bit more sense. Diggy just, he strikes me as the type of guy you bring off the bench 6 minutes into the game for instant energy, instant offense, spark plug, whatever other cliches you want to throw out there. So those are, I think, your first 4 starters. And then what I think needs to happen eventually is AJ Storr needs to be your 5th starter. Right now, though, he doesn't look like one of your 5 best players. So final answer, I'm going to say it'll be, see, I could go off the wall and say, whoa, Marquise Passmore is starting, and then he plays 6 minutes, and we go, okay. But I'm just going to go with the most logical answer, which is probably Rylan Griffin.
Yeah, and it'd be weird because you're looking at Diggy Coit having a 19-point game, and then you're saying, oh, he started, he did really well. Now we're going to pull him from the starting lineup for the start of the season. But I kind of agree with you. There were some post-game comments from Bill Self talking about that Zeke Mayo, the reason he put him to the bench was because he wasn't shooting it enough in practice, and he thought this would get his attention. And he had a good game. So it seems like the response Bill Self wanted, that he'll get back into the starting lineup. Could they even start Dajuan Harris, Diggy Coit, and Zeke Mayo, right? I mean, that's, I think, a possibility. I definitely would. I would agree with you right now. That's going to be my starting 5 off the bat. If we're talking about starting 5 for once we get to March 1st, also agree with you that AJ Storr, it would be most beneficial if he ends up being there. Would you predict that would be the starting 5 come March, or could you see things going south over the course of the season there?
Well, I could see, yeah, it could happen. If you're talking about this team reaching their potential, you need your best players to be on the court. So regardless about fit or how he's looked so far, the fact remains that by the end of the season, when you want to be peaking and hitting your strides at the right time, you need to have the most talented players on your team doing the same exact thing individually, hitting their strides at the right time. So It wouldn't shock me if it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen all the time. Guys don't fit, guys don't work out. But in terms of what needs to happen for I think KU to be the best version of themselves, yeah, AJ Storr needs to be out there.
All right, who plays more minutes this year, Diggy Coit or AJ Storr?
AJ Storr.
Okay. You feel very big on that. What about Diggy Coit versus Rylan Griffin?
Gosh, that's tough because at the end of the day, we know Dajuan, regardless of what Bill says at media day or whatever, Dajuan's going to play 30 minutes a night. That is going to happen. Lock it in. I do not care. I'm not going to believe anything anybody says about that. Dajuan will play 30 minutes a night. So then it comes down to how valuable of a role does Zeke fill? So at first, when people were talking about how impressive Diggy has looked in practices and the coaches are really impressed and he does this and that, I was kind of taking it with some skepticism to say, all right, that's fine. But once the games start, how much of this is going to matter? Against Washburn, that guy was electric. He was the most, you couldn't take your eyes off of him when he was on the court. So I'm coming around. Don't get me wrong. I'm definitely more bullish on him than I was 2 weeks ago. But again, it was Washburn, and then we're going to get Howard. But then the schedule tightens up really quickly with these non-con games. So I'm keeping a close eye on it. But right now, you're asking me today, at the end of October, I'm going to stick with Rylan Griffin playing more minutes, but ask me again next week.
Okay, who plays more minutes, Rakis Passmore or Flory Badunga?
I'm going to say Flory because he has less competition. And yes, Hunter's going to play a lot, but when you look at Rakis and all the talent you have at the guard spot and the wing spot, he's got to beat out a couple of guys just to get into the rotation. Flory is your backup big. Have you watched Zach Clemens play? Flory Badunga is your backup big man. So at least you're going to get 8 to 10 minutes a night spelling Hunter. Whereas Rakis, I don't think you can lock him in for 8 minutes a night right now.
Yeah, the floor is definitely higher for Flory and the ceiling, no pun intended. The ceiling is higher for Passmore in theory. And what I find interesting, Passmore's played the same amount of minutes in the two exhibitions as AJ Storr, but that's just exhibition ball, right?
But when you think about Flory, because of his position, again, I don't know anything about Hunter's injury. It sounds like it's not serious, but he's one Hunter Dickinson injury away from playing 20 minutes a night.
Maybe more.
Whereas Passmore, Rylan Griffin goes down or AJ Storr goes down or they're just not performing up to standards, you're still in a competition. It's much thinner in the front court than it is at those wing spots.
All right, who winds up being the highest drafted player at any time when they go out, right? So you could be comparing 2025 draft versus 2027 draft, whatever. Who ends up being the highest drafted player from this year's roster?
How tall is Flory?
I think he's listed 6'9", 6'8", but he has like a 7'5" wingspan.
Yeah, but we said the same thing about Cliff Alexander and Shaq Diallo. We're like, yeah, but they're not that, they don't have prototypical NBA size, but they got long wingspans. Didn't end up panning out. I'm not trying to.
Shaq was picked 34th, something like that.
Yeah, and he stuck around the NBA for a little while. That's tough because I want to say Flory because he's closer to being an NBA product than Rakis Passmore. I'll tell you what, if Rakis would have converted that poster dunk that he went for against Washburn, I would say him. But since he didn't, that's going to knock him down a few spots. It's one of those two guys though, right? It's one of those two freshmen. Would you agree with that?
I think there was a world where AJ Storr came in and improved the things Bill Self wanted him to. He's a good scorer. He's a power athlete wing that he ends up being, a late first round pick. And then at that point, you just take the given commodity. But given the struggles we've seen, I don't think it'd be smart to project that at this point in time.
Well, okay, think about this.
Yeah.
Ochai, a little smaller, but more explosive. Ochai had an All-American senior season and went 13th overall. Mm-hmm. Do you see any world where AJ Storr goes 13th overall?
Not now, given how this has started, right? But you could say Storr is a bigger player than Ochai. Storr probably has more off the bounce when he's right than Ochai, but Ochai much better shooter, which is like the most important thing in the world in the NBA for wings. Now, you could also say that, again, we're talking NBA draft whenever.
And Ochai had, probably got glowing reviews in the interviews.
Yes.
Right?
Whereas a Store, you're at your 7th school in 7 years.
He made up for all of his shortcomings.
Yes.
With that stuff.
The thing with AJ Store, he could have another year in theory. So who's to say that
that's not going to be good for him? But that's not going to be good for his draft stock because he'll have spent 5 years in college. You know that.
It'll be 4,
which is what
same as Ochai.
Okay, yeah, that's right. But still, I don't see a world where he goes 13th overall. He'd have to have the All-American season. But again, Ochai, athlete, 3-point shooting. I don't know that AJ Store has that kind of stuff. So I'm going Flory Badunga. And I'm trying to think of a ceiling. I mean, the best player in the NBA or the world that plays like him would probably be Bam Adebayo, right? But that's best case scenario. You're talking about NBA All-Star top 20 player in the NBA. After that, I really do struggle to think of 6'9" guys who basically have to play the 5.
Right, and can't shoot. And even Bam can pass really well, right? So I would actually go Rickey's Passmore.
Yeah, as I kind of talk through it, that probably makes the most sense. Because even at the point where Flory gets drafted, if he goes this year, I don't think he's going to have the numbers to be a lottery pick. So I'm looking at 2026 for him as well, same as Rickey. So at that point, I'll just go with the guy who it's easier for me to figure out why an NBA team would fall in love with you.
All right, last one, over under 2.5 trophies. So when I say trophy, it can be team or individual. You can win the Big 12 regular season, Big 12 postseason. They're not in any conference tournament or non-conference tournaments this year, but you can make one for the Final Four. You can win one for the national title. If anybody wins, the Wooden Award or the Bob Cousy Award or any of these things. Over under 2.5 trophies for the KU team this year.
And for what it's worth, I believe they hand out a trophy for Big 12 Player of the Year.
Yes. Do they?
Yeah, they do. They do it at the Big 12 tournament.
Print out sheet of paper.
It's a certificate. But you know what? 10 years ago, it'd be best player on KU, probably winning that award. Now, with how many teams there are, it's much harder, even if you're an All-American candidate, to win Big 12 Player of the Year. With that being said, I'm still going to say Hunter wins Big 12 Player of the Year. I think he's going to put up a 20-10 season. So there's one. Big 12 is going to be tough sledding. Big 12 is going to be tough sledding to win the Big 12 championship.
If you win one of the two, conference or regular season, you feel great.
Yeah. But man, what is it? 5 teams in the top 10 come from the Big 12. Mm-hmm. And this is a team with a lot of transfers. And as we've went over many, many times, typically these teams don't come out of the gates quite as hot as the Bill Self teams that have a bunch of dudes who have been around for a long time. So I'm just protecting myself. I'm not being a pessimist. I'm just protecting against the odds. I'm going to say under.
Ooh, okay. Does the NABC Pete Newell Big Man of the Year Award, does that count? It comes with a trophy. Zach Edey won it last year.
A trophy's a trophy, right?
Because, if Hunter's winning Big 12 Player of the Year, he might win that award too. That's 2 right off the bat.
But he's got to go up against Cooper Flagg for that one. Cooper Flagg may have already won that award.
Yeah, maybe they'll count him as a wing. I don't know. We'll see. I'll say over. That if you win a national title, that's 2 for the Final Four natty right away. Or if you win, the Big 12, both regular season post, then you just got to get one more. So yeah, I'll take the over, but yeah, you could convince me either way. All right, let's get to a little KU football. What is wrong with the Jayhawks? Why does this keep happening? Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and of the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, continuing on with a little KU football talk here. So another close loss, another close one to Kansas State, where you have several different plays you can point back to and be like, they should have won this game or they could have won this game. 7 straight one-score losses now. And at some point, like, is there a little bit of bad luck in this? Yeah, probably. But like at some point when it keeps happening, there has to be a reason why it keeps happening and something you have to point to that you say, we need to do this better so it stops happening. What to you is the biggest reason why this keeps happening?
Oh, that's a loaded question. You know what? I don't know. I'm not going to lie to you and try to act like I've come up with a solution on how to fix this team's problems. What I do think needs to be addressed is probably not going to happen until we can get into play calling. The train came off the tracks for this team. And I think that things can snowball very quickly in a sport where every single game seems massive, whether it's against your biggest rival or a non-con team. Every single win or loss dramatically affects the outlook for the rest of your season. So going back to UNLV and Illinois, those games at the time that just felt like, okay, it's fine. I know this isn't what we want, but there's still plenty of football left in front of you. Well, each one that comes after that, where the mistakes are repeated, amplifies them. Now they're becoming bigger than just, oh, we were unlucky here. Oh, we made some bad mistakes here. And I'll be honest, I keep trying to look at Lance Leipold and wonder what happened here. Because at some point, I do think we have to stop just like blaming Jalen and blaming Jeff Grimes. Lance Leipold, when you think about like his archetype as a coach, he's not the schemer, right? He's not the elite recruiter. He is the CEO. He's the program builder. And I look at a guy, and again, I'm not necessarily criticizing, maybe you can take it as this, but I'm more so just looking at the data from the last year. He spent a lot of time talking about fan support. He spent a lot of time seemingly caring about NIL and fundraising and getting this new stadium built. And I just wonder if he took his eye off the ball a little bit. I just wonder if the things that have made him such a great coach over the last 2 decades, he forgot about and abandoned a little bit, because for the first time in his career, he is dealing with extra factors that he's never had to deal with or worry about or prioritize in past years. And I wonder if in doing so, he lost out on all of the factors and all of the things and qualities that he has that has made him such a tremendous coach, because this team looks undisciplined. They look like, even in games where the game plan is sound and they come out of the gates firing like they did against Kansas State, all of a sudden, one mistake, a dropped pass by Quentin Skinner, then a guy running out of bounds. Like, we can excuse all of these individually and say, oh, guys drop passes sometimes. It happens. Okay, a guy on special teams trying to make a play made a mistake. All of these individually are fine. You put them all together, game after game, week after week, it starts to become a pattern. And you start to say, why does this happen to your team more than it happens to everybody else? And I think there's going to have to be a big, long look in the mirror if you're Lance Leipold at the end of the season and say, where did I go wrong? Where did I misstep? And how do we get back on track and back to doing the things that Lance Leipold coach teams are used to doing?
All right, well said. Let's just move on from there. Whose stat line is it anyway? Next. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for super fans, the fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave. We see you. You know what else gave a bit of Jayhawk fan fuel this week was when Diggy Coit was hitting all those threes against Washburn, 5 of them to be exact. And he is 5 Hour Energy. I mean, he's pressing guys up and down the court. He's shifting around. He's hitting threes. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you prepare for your big tailgate or you're ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help you keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. All right, finishing things up, whose stat line is it anyway? People have been upset about KU football not giving Devin Neal the ball in key moments in the fourth quarter. So we have actual numbers here. So, Nick, would you like to take a guess at the exact number of touches that Devin Neal has in the fourth quarter of FBS games this season? And I'll give you the amount of plays that they've run. I guess it would be, oh gosh, I didn't total this up before. You're probably looking around 140, somewhere in that range. So would you like to guess how many Devin Neal has in terms of touches?
In 7 games, is that right? 7 FBS games?
Yes, 7 FBS games. Yes, just the fourth quarter.
So 20 plays a game. Shoot.
It's actually like 165-ish for the total plays.
He goes 6 touches a game in the fourth quarter, so 42 touches.
That would be well too high. The correct answer is 24 runs, of which he has 169 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Jalen has thrown the ball 50 times. He has run the ball 16 times, and then he's been sacked an additional 3 other. Devin has the 24 runs. Highshaw has 6, 2 for Luke Grimm, and then a run for a couple other guys here or there. But if I take out the drives where it was under 2 minutes to go, because obviously keep in mind, if it's under 2 minutes to go, you're down late, you're not going to run the ball. So probably not fair to count those into the stats. So if I take out the drives with under 2 minutes where KU was down and they have to throw the ball, this is what you would end up being left with. 52 plays. Jalen Daniels, 14 of 28 passing for 165 yards, touchdown, interception, 13 carries for 59 yards, a touchdown and a fumble. That equates to 41 plays for Jalen Daniels with 224 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 turnovers. The Devin Neal ones, you get 24 carries for 169 yards with 2 touchdowns, or I'm sorry, you get 23 carries for 166 yards with 2 touchdowns and no turnovers. So if I just equate this out, finish out all this math, this will be the easy way to put it. In the fourth quarter this year, Devin Neal has 23 touches. They're averaging 7 yards per play on those plays. Jalen Daniels has 41 plays. If you subtract the 1 play that was an intentional grounding, KU would be averaging 5.2 yards per play.
It's kind of wild because if you let's say you coming into the season, you thought KU's offense was going to be terrible. You knew that Jalen Daniels was going to be bad. And that the only saving grace on offense was Devin Neal. And you think about, like, maybe this is too strong of a comparison, but like Derrick Henry with the Titans, never had a good quarterback, was never a particularly great offense, but they knew how to put teams away because nobody wanted to tackle Derrick Henry in the fourth quarter. Now, Devin's not that. He's not a physically imposing back, but he is a very effective one and a very efficient one. And it would be shocking to me now, having seen what we've seen this season and knowing that Jalen has struggled and knowing that Devin has played so well, that you could get to the end of the game where all you need to do is move the ball, chew up the clock, and put teams away. And you are refusing to do it. You are refusing to go with the one thing that not only we know works, but is also a very effective strategy for putting teams away late in games. Run the ball, chew up the clock, and they don't do it. And again, this kind of goes back to the mistakes. It's like in a vacuum, I can explain. We could probably go through and watch the fourth quarter for all these games and say, okay, I see why they did that there. And there may only be like one play where you'd say, why didn't they hand it off to Devin there? Why didn't they hand it off to Devin here? In an individual game, you'd say, okay, one mistake, no big deal. You put them all together, and that's when you say, why don't they want him to get touches when the game is on the line and he has been so good for you?
Yeah, and it's like the one game they actually did it was West Virginia, and it didn't work out. So I wonder if that clouded the judgment that it's like, oh, see, we tried it, didn't work, but I don't know. It's your best player. Maybe try it more.
I would hope coaches aren't making decisions based off of one thing that happened in one game a month ago. You know,
Kidding.
Yeah, it's shocking. And I'm assuming every single defensive coordinator is going into these games saying like, oh yeah, they're going to put us away with Devin. And then all of a sudden Jalen's scrambling, diving. And like, again, that fumble against Kansas State, I don't really blame Jalen. He was trying to make a play. The dude's tough as hell. Like I love that he's willing to go out there and do that, but it shouldn't be left up to Jalen. It should be left up to the coaches and the offensive coordinator to say, we are going to put the ball in number 4's hands.
Yeah. All right. That'll do it for this episode of the show. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. Check us out on our YouTube page. He's Nick Schwert. I'm Derek Johnson. See you next time with LOJ.